Fast fact: the term auditor comes from the Latin word to hear, because the first recorded auditors acted as the king's ears, listening to the oral reports of responsible officials and confirming their accuracy. I'm Drew Thomas, and you're listening to Bank Chats. So Jeff, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Drew?
You good? I'm better than I deserve.
No.
Always better than I deserve. Did you know today's Apple Pie Day?
I did know it's Apple Pie Day.
Today's Apple Pie Day.
Yes.
It's pretty cool.
Do you like apple pie?
Have you seen me? Do I like apple pie? Yes, of course I like apple
Okay.
pie. Do you like apple pie?
I love apple pie.
Are you a Dutch apple pie person, or are you like a regular apple pie person?
Any apple pie.
A la mode?
Any pie. I'm a pie guy. Over cake. Definitely pie.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. This is not a podcast about apple pie. The reason I bring up that it is Apple Pie Day is that there are a lot of days that I've noticed that, every day on the calendar is now a national day of something.
Absolutely.
And last month we talked about the fact that it was
Financial Literacy Month.
Financial Literacy Month,
Teach
right?
Children to Save
Teach
Day,
Children to Save Day was on April 24th this
Yep.
year, or this year.
Yeah.
It's still this year, even though it's past, so I don't know. But May is Internal Audit Awareness Month.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And to make you are you more aware of internal audit now because it's May?
I am a little bit because I did some research, but prior to that, no.
Okay.
I didn't
So,
know
but you
anything
are
about
more
it.
aware?
Yeah.
Great. We're done.
All right.
No, we have our senior auditor from Ameriserve with us, Laura Fiore. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
To be here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So we're going to talk a little bit about internal audit and what that means. So tell us a little bit about yourself and like what your job entails.
Okay, sure. So I'm Laura Fiore. I'm Senior Vice President, Chief Auditor here at Ameriserve. Been here 14 years, always been in internal audit.
Yeah.
Prior to this, I was an external auditor. So I'm a career auditor and excited that internal audit has an awareness month, right?
Yeah.
So I think internal audit is very important. We're here to help the company. We're here to help our customers. We're here to help the community as a whole, right? Like we're here to help make sure the initiatives that the bank's undertaking to help our customers in the community are working in line with all the rules and regulations that we have in banking, right? But internal auditors span all kinds of industries.
So what's the difference between an internal and an external auditor? Because you said you were an external auditor first, right?
Yeah. So external auditors typically work like in a firm setting. So they're at, like accounting firms, auditing firms, consultant firms. Like the primary role normally of an external auditor is more so financial statement auditing. So making sure a company's financial statements, are accurate, that they're accurately stating what the company actually financial picture really looks like.
Okay.
Because there are people on the outside in the public, if you're a publicly traded company, shareholders use that information. So external auditors are a lot of times focused more so on financial statement assertion, saying, to the public or whoever may use a company's financial statements, that the company's financial health is appropriately, shown in that document. Also, a lot of times, outside of banking, if you're a company and you need to engage in a lending relationship with a bank, guess what? Banks like to see your financial picture. So external auditing is kind of the top layer of a way to assure that, you have an independent, objective person saying, this company is in good financial condition.
So as an internal auditor, you're basically doing the opposite of that. Like when does an external auditor ask you for that stuff and then you provide it as an internal auditor, or how does that?
External auditors can also do other types of reviews, right? Like you can specifically engage them to do a very specific topic for you. From an internal perspective, we kind of go beyond, right? So financial statements, we are, from an internal perspective, before the external auditors look at it, we're doing our own reviews similar to what they would do, so that if there is an issue or something that would be incorrect, we could get that resolved before an external person is kind of giving a grade or a judge.
Gotcha.
That looks like. So we're really here from an internal perspective, kind of the last line to say, we feel like this is appropriately stated, this is accurate information. If it's not, we would work with someone to get it resolved before that external kind of
You're the
rating.
pre-test before the final exam.
Yeah. You're the scrimmage game.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, in that analogy, right, like an internal audit, we focus also on compliance with rules, regulations that are industry specific. A lot of times that's beyond what a normal external audit would normally entail.
Okay.
So, from like a banking perspective, you have Federal Reserve, you have FDIC, you have OCC, depending what kind of, bank organization you are under, you have a certain set of guidelines and rules, and you get examined by regulatory authorities based on how you're organized. And so we're also kind of the scrimmage or the pre-test to say before an external examiner, before a Federal Reserve, group would come in. We're doing kind of that pre-testing, that initial review to say, we feel like we have good support, we have good processes, we can tell things are working, so that when we get kind of that external review from an examiner, that we know that we've kind of, got a good process in place to represent to them. And if we don't, we like to work internally to fix that and show that we've resolved that internally together.
So banks have compliance departments as well. How do you work with compliance? Or like, is there any like crossover for roles between audit and compliance?
Yeah. So in auditing, no matter what industry you're in, you have what they call the 3 lines of defense.
Okay.
Right. So like first line of defense is, customer contact, the management team. They have layers of controls, right? Of making sure transactions, accounts, loans, whatever it may be, making sure that they followed policies, procedures, rules, right? So there's management reviews on top of what work is being done. So there's a layer there. Then your second line of defense is things like compliance departments or risk departments. And they're there to support and make sure that specific tests of specific rules are done. So they're kind of more limited in their topic coverage. And then from the third line of defense, which is internal audit, we come in and test all layers from the very beginning, frontline customer contact, all the way up through the supervisory reviews of management, all the way through like our risk department and what their controls and reviews are, the compliance testing to make sure their testing made sense and they caught what they were supposed to, and all the reporting that happens out of all those layers. So we're coming in at the very last line there and making sure that everyone's roles were appropriately covering items.
Okay.
So there is some overlap, but we do work very closely with all the lines, right? Like obviously, if you're a manager of an area, you want to make sure your team's doing a good job and make sure like what you're doing is your time well spent. If you're a compliance department, we can help be a resource to them or management, helping them interpret rules or research or find information that helps them do their jobs as well. So, we're really here to help along the way and be a resource to, kind of help everyone study.
Mhm.
You brought up the testing.
Yeah.
Excellent. So yeah, we know where all the, study material is. We know where the books and the manuals and all that is, like internal and regulatory and accounting rules. Like we can help get you to the right place if you have questions.
So what made you get into auditing? Like what kind of a person, what's your personality style that makes a good auditor? Like what appealed to you about it?
So I didn't initially know I wanted to be an auditor. I did initially pick accounting because accounting is a really good like general business field where every company, every industry needs accountants, right? Everyone needs that, right? So I liked that there's a variety there. If you become like a doctor or a nurse, you're always going to be in healthcare. Can't really apply that to different industries, right?
Right.
So being an accountant, I liked that it was a very versatile role. And then I got into auditing, did some internships initially, right? But what I liked about auditing is obviously there's like an analytical type of person, right? Like analyzing data, a little bit of like puzzles and problem solving. Curiosity is good because you're trying to like fit pieces of puzzles together and analyze information and try to figure out the best way to do something. But more so than it's probably realized from an auditor perspective, you have to really be a people person. So I love working with people. I love talking with people. I love hearing people's perspectives, and linking people together is really what you end up doing in an auditing role, right? So, one department's doing a piece of the puzzle and they may not know where that information goes. And the other department's receiving this information and they know what they need to do with it, but they don't really know where it came from. And so really, from an audit perspective, you're kind of connecting the dots for a company, and you can see a process beginning to end. Like, where did it start? Where did it end up? And along the way, like, who all had touch points in that. And if something goes wrong, you can obviously help then figure out which piece of the puzzle didn't happen appropriately that caused a chain reaction to a problem, right? And then that's where audit can come in and help and say, hey, you might not have realized, but you changed something you were doing and they were using that, and now it's not there for them to use, but they didn't know that.
Sure.
So really, like, the people skills of linking things together, like, very much appealed to me.
Yeah.
And just the variety in a day, right? So auditing's not something where you come in and day out, you do the same thing every day. Right?
No set procedure or anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet there's procedures.
I'm sure there are procedures. Yes.
There's definitely a method and a way to do things, but we basically span every department here at the bank, right? So, like, any company you were at, you would probably span across different departments and get to see a more full company picture of how everything fits together. So that's what makes it very interesting.
So from a customer perspective, right? Because obviously most of the people that listen to this are not bankers themselves. They're
Right.
most likely listening to us either for entertainment while they're falling asleep, maybe, or because they actually want to learn something about banking, hopefully. But from a customer perspective, why is audit important? Because you're not really customer facing, right? Your customer is the bank employees and the different departments, right? So why do customers why should customers be happy that there's an internal audit in banking?
Yeah, absolutely. So having an internal audit department, especially in-house here fully, is very important because we have the best interest of the company, which also means we have the best interest of the customers. Because what's in the best interest of the customer is ultimately what's in the best interest of our company, right? Like,
Sure.
Obviously there's a balance to everything, but from a customer perspective, it's helpful to know that there's multiple layers of controls, departments here, right? Internal audit's objective in that, we're separated from the direct processes and we can come in and give fresh eyes. Like, fresh eyes to something is always good.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, we're looking at rules, regulations, policies, all that exciting stuff. But at the end of the day, we're making sure the customers' accounts are being treated appropriately in line with the rules. And obviously making sure that the financial statements are accurate, which is important for shareholders, which is a different type of, I don't want to say customer, but like a different key constituency.
sure,
It's
right.
important. So, we're here making sure the bank is operating in a safe and sound manner so that, we're here to serve the community and make sure that the bank's making, efficient use of their time and resources so we can better serve customers.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, when we've discussed a lot on in different avenues on the show, but just the idea that, you're entrusting as a customer, you're entrusting your bank with a lot, in terms of your livelihood. I mean, if my debit card gets lost, that's it for me. Like, I can't do anything. I have to, I can't get gas. I can't go to the store. I can't do so. And that's a pretty basic thing. So the idea that you're entrusting the bank with your money, with your information, things like that, knowing that the bank is being a good trustee of that information is very important, and so I get that. And having somebody objective within the organization has to be important too, because you can't have a conflict of interest where you're making decisions that are in the best interest of the bank, but maybe not necessarily for the customer or vice versa. You need to have somebody sort of managing that, right? Balancing that out.
Keeping the balance of that is always, the goal. And obviously, you brought up confidentiality of information. That's one of the most important things in today's environment, right?
Yeah.
Like fraud and scams. And people's identity being stolen. The bank obviously has a lot of very personal information of people, their names, their account numbers, how much money's in their accounts. Like, we have all that information that, we commit to protect, and we have many layers of departments and people here that are committed to protecting that information, because it's the right thing to do. But obviously there's a lot of rules about that as well. So, definitely keeping the customers happy with our services, but at the same time, obviously protecting that information. That's so important and vital.
So you've brought up rules a couple of times. So let's talk about it, what some of those rules are. Because Jeff, you kind of this kind of dovetails, I think, to your question about compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because compliance, they talk about all these regulations, and I guess audit does too.
Yeah, and from
I always thought that compliance handled all of that. You have a question about any of the regulations, you go to compliance. But
so what are some rules that customers might like? Are we talking about regulations like, I'm going to go banking terminology here, like Reg CC or Reg DD or things like that people can look up online to see what they are? Or are we talking about rules that are less public, that are internal, or both? I don't know.
All the rules for banking are publicly available.
Okay.
Right? They have like bank exam manuals, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the OCC. They all have their own rules and guidebooks, but they're all pretty well aligned for the most part. But yeah, like Reg CC is the hold and the availability of your funds on checks that are cashed, right? And there's a lot of rules about how soon the bank has to make your funds available, and Reg CC outlines all those parameters of, depends on, the amount of the check, the amount of money in your account, where's the check written from, where is the check cashed at, right? So like there's a hold there, because if, we cash your check too soon and we haven't got communication from the other bank yet that money's really available, if that money never shows up, and we gave that money out, like the bank's short on money or out of our own personal, right? So like the whole reason that there's a hold process is to make sure we get the customer the money as soon as we safely can give them that money, to verify the transaction's gonna, be whole and be good. But at the same time, making sure we're following the rules for the various situations that can come up.
We had an interesting show that we talked about a number of years about a year ago, Serena Williams. Do you remember that story?
Oh, yeah. Try to cash $1 million check.
Did you hear about that one?
No.
So Serena Williams, everybody knows who Serena Williams is. If you have not lived under a rock, you know who's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And she found in her car was $1 million check.
Yeah, her manager or something said, "Hey, you better cash that."
Yeah, it was just like lying in her car. It must be nice to have $1 million check just lying around that you forgot about, right? So, but she went through the drive-through at her bank, and they put a hold on the check, and she flipped out. She didn't understand why there was a hold on her check, And it's like, look, you're Serena Williams, and we know, but there's still processes and procedures we have to follow here, right? So
Rules apply to everyone.
yeah. Do they? No.
They do.
So what are some of the other things we talked about when I was doing some preliminary research on audit? The money laundering came up a lot. Can we talk a little bit about what that is and how banks help to prevent it?
Yes, absolutely. So money laundering, I don't know. Do you guys watch Ozark on Netflix, right?
I did, yeah.
If you want to understand money laundering, you want
Is that accurate?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But money laundering is basically when criminal activity occurs, right, to generate funds, and you try to basically make those funds appear that they're from a legitimate source.
Okay, gotcha.
So money laundering is, I derive my income from some type of criminal activity. I try to cover it up as part of some legitimate activity. And then I, integrate it, place it through the banking world, right? And a lot of times people who money launder will move it through multiple bank accounts, multiple different locations, right?
Okay.
And then it's harder to follow that trail of funds, right? So
yeah.
Basically, the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act, anti-money laundering, there's a lot of rules around trying to make sure, like, criminal activity, and, if you go back to, like, the Patriot Act was unfortunately, like, following 9/11 and terrorist financing and like a big push there. But, it's really criminal activity of any type. We don't want that flowing through government regulated banks because, criminal activity is illegal.
Right.
And that's where Bitcoin has become so popular. And unfortunately, Bitcoin's not regulated. So a lot of times if there's, a fraud or a scam,
Mm-hmm.
a fraudster or a scammer is an illegal activity, right?
Sure.
And a lot of times today you hear them trying to get money moved to Bitcoin. And that's because it can't be as easily traced. It can't be identified. It can't be recalled, right? Like if it moves through 5 banks, those 5 banks can end up tracing that and getting communication back. There's an authority that can help connect the dots to get people's money back. Once you put it into Bitcoin, there's not good regulation or authority. So that money kind of
until you
Concept
offload it.
traceable.
Yeah, until you take it out.
Yeah, so that's why scammers, fraudsters really, unfortunately, a lot of times ask people to do things in Bitcoin.
So, yeah, but I guess my thing is from an audit perspective, really what part of your job, I mean, you have a pretty intense job, but part of your job is trying to track that and make sure that people aren't doing those things, right? Because you're a check and balance, right? So if something doesn't add up, no pun intended, but if something doesn't add up, that's part of your job to notice that and point it out and stop it right where it is, right? Before it gets too far down the line. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I guess I would say we're the reviewer of the people that do that, right?
Okay.
We have, all the way up through the various departments here, everyone has a responsibility to identify, if something's fraudulent or something appears, outside of the ordinary or something doesn't add up and money's missing, like that should be way before audit becomes involved, right? Like that should be, we have layers of controls. We have a dedicated, set of departments that are reviewing and checking for those kinds of things. And then audits coming in and saying, like we may pick our own samples, right? Like in audit, you pick samples. So,
Okay.
so you'll say if there was like 100 of something, we'll pick 10%. And if, 10 that we pick have a problem, if there's 1 or 2 that have a problem, that probably means there's more that have a problem, right? So you have sample approaches. And you use those samples to say like, okay, we checked 10 accounts and we saw 1 that maybe wasn't handled the way we feel. Let's keep looking and let's get to a root cause and let's connect people and figure out, is there something here that we could have done different? Yeah.
So sorry. So if you do find something that you see that is wrong, how do you rectify that? Like, is there a procedure that you just go scold that department that you did something wrong, or what is the procedure to actually fix the situations, or is it different for every situation?
I mean, it gets back to those people skills, right? Like we pull the people together that that are intimately involved in the daily, whatever that topic is, like their daily processes of how they manage something or how they coordinate something. We really pull people together that are along that lines of, where did the transaction start? Where did the item start? Where did it end? Along the way did that, maybe should have been identified but didn't? And how can we basically like learn together maybe what we could adjust? So, and sometimes it's like just internal education, right? And we try to educate our customers as well. Like a lot of times, if you lose your debit card or it's stolen or you do get some type of scam call or email and you get impacted by that, our frontline customer contact people try to educate customers on like, hey, we would have never asked you for your social security number over the phone. Like, if you would ever get a call like that again, know that our bank wouldn't do that, right? Like I know you guys do a lot of online social media education.
But banks never ask.
Try, yeah.
The banks never ask that stuff. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just like becoming more aware and growing our education together on, kind of how should this have worked better? How could we get better? How can we continue to, protect our customers, protect the bank? And so it takes a village, right? It takes everyone.
Yeah. Everybody's got to work together.
Going in the same direction with the same goals to know how we can get everything to work appropriately.
Yeah.
So there's no way that we could possibly cover every rule and regulation and so forth that's involved in banking, right? But what happens to, I guess there are probably levels here. Like what happens to a bank or I mean, you could say any organization, because I'm sure audit exists in places other than banking, right? I mean, every company has some sort of internal audit process most likely, but what happens, because we're talking finance, what happens to a bank that isn't following the rules? What are some of the consequences for not doing what you're supposed to do?
I mean, obviously, as a customer, we want to make sure that there's good customer service, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not doing something right, probably eventually your customers are going to realize something's not right, right?
Yeah, you would hope.
Customers, right? And no one wants to do that. Like, customers are very important to any business.
Mhm.
So obviously, customer service definitely is top of mind to make sure we're serving our customers appropriately. And a lot of times the rules are made for the benefit of customers.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But beyond that, from a regulatory perspective, right? Like if an external auditor comes in or an examiner comes in, I guess anytime you break a rule, there can be a punishment, I guess.
Yeah.
Is where you're going with this, right? So for financial statements, if your financial statements are, inaccurate to a significant degree,
Mhm.
that can, if you're a publicly traded company, that can be public information.
Mhm.
So you obviously can have reputation risk with that. From an examiner standpoint, most exam results are confidential. They are not shared publicly until you get into a very high level issue, right?
Mhm.
So the FFIEC, which is basically like a joint authority that pulls together the Federal Reserve and the OCC, it's like an agreed upon set of rules and requirements where the various agencies agree on how something is to be handled. They actually have a site called FFIEC enforcement site. And if you go out there, you can search any person's name, you can search any bank name, and it'll tell you if there's been like a formal legal action taken, like a cease and desist order or a
Mhm.
penalty or a fine. So in very extreme cases, you can have to pay fines and get penalties, and people can be disbarred from banking if they identify a specific person was to blame. Like, if someone would embezzle a large sum of money from a bank, like they would obviously end up probably getting charges pressed against them. I mean, it becomes like a legal issue.
Well, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking Enron.
Exactly.
I mean,
You go back to why we have a lot of controls and rules. Normally,
Yeah.
it's out of something really bad happening. So
Yeah.
that's a good example of something really bad happening.
Yeah.
A publicly traded company, they were, not issuing their financial statements completely inaccurately.
Yeah.
It did not represent the actual picture of that company's standing. And what happened, right? People lost their jobs, shareholders lost a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? And that's where, we basically have Sarbanes-Oxley, which is financial controls for publicly traded companies. Any publicly traded company, right? Because Enron
Mhm.
wasn't a bank.
Right. No, that they weren't. But
Yeah.
but when you're talking about like financial statements and being audited and keeping
Yeah.
things on the above board, that's one of the first things that I think of is thinking back to those days. And I mean, that was that company's name was everywhere for a long time because of all of the yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the rules we have today came out shortly after the fallout of all of that,
Yeah.
and govern a lot of the way that the rules for financial statement controls are.
So you mentioned Sarbanes-Oxley. Do you want to elaborate on what that is maybe a little bit or?
Yeah, so Sarbanes-Oxley was passed after, the Enron
Yeah.
excitement in the world, and basically is a set of rules about how you control processes for financial statement reporting. And so you're required to abide by that if you're publicly traded, which Ameriserb is publicly traded. Our stock's on NASDAQ.
Mhm.
We are Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. Sarbanes-Oxley requires you have an internal audit process as well.
Hey, how about that?
So yeah, it really governs the fact that everything should have minimum of 2 to 3 sets of eyes, right? Like
Yeah.
you should have processes that prevent bad things from happening. You should have processes that detect when bad things do happen. And then
Because
you should
people are
have
human
monitoring.
too. I mean, honestly, people are human too. I don't think that after like discussing things with you, like I think a lot of people have an unfair impression of what audit means. That there's
It's always been a scary word. Yeah.
yeah, or that they're trying to catch you
find
into
something. Yeah.
which that's not entirely true. I mean, you are trying to identify problems. I mean, that is part of your job, but you're not doing it from a standpoint of like, ooh, I just can't wait to stick it to somebody. Like you're really doing it in the customer's best
better
and
the company.
and to better the company, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest misconceptions. I mean, no one likes to have their work checked, right? Like, I mean, it's just a natural, like, defense mechanism, I think, right?
Sure.
Hear the word audit, like, oh, that sounds bad. Someone's going to come check if I did everything right, which makes me nervous, right? But really, it's here to give help and guidance and to make you feel good that what you're doing is working. That's what it should be. Like on the best day for an auditor, everything matches, everything works.
Yeah.
Our goals are followed, and we're all on the same page, and everything's working great. Like anytime there's a problem, that does nothing but add work, right? 'Cause
For
now
you
have to
too. I mean,
investigate.
yeah,
You
right.
have to investigate, and you have to figure out why did it break, and when did it break, and where did it break, and how do we fix it, and how do we pull everyone together? So, I mean, while that can be very interesting, obviously the best outcome for everyone is that, we're all on the same page and everything's working the way it should for customers, for the company, and we can invest our time on other things
Yeah.
to move forward new initiatives to help customers or the community or the company grow is the ultimate goal.
So you had mentioned a little bit about how you have to sort of spot check things at times, right? Because really, I mean, even a smaller community bank processes thousands, tens of thousands of transactions, sometimes a day, hundreds of thousands, millions a month or a year. There are systems that check those things to make sure that they're accurate on a one-to-one basis. But it's not realistic for an audit department of 10 people to be able to look at 10 million transactions, right? So you have to sort of spot check and look for things. How often do you perform that kind of an audit, I guess is where I was kind of going with this. How long do you audit different things at different times of the year? Is it always like, hey, it's January, it's audit time, or is it something different?
No, we're working year round, rotating through topics, right? And like we take a risk-based approach. So where there's more risk to the company or there's more risk to a customer, we try to spend our time where the risk is. So, if there are things that are fully automated by a system and we can check like system settings and confirm the system's working, systems are free from human error, but they're not free from how they're set up to work, right?
Yeah, humans set it up to begin with. So.
So we definitely use technology a lot to, make sure we're getting as much coverage as we can.
Yeah.
Because as you said, like, thousands and thousands of transactions, what would looking at 10 transactions do? But we'll look at, like the system controls and from that say like, well, where's the risk that something goes wrong in this? And then from that, we are looking at, the various levels of processes and how, the company is spending their time and how they're feeling comfortable that it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really getting an understanding of what the personnel do, what the system does, using technology to help us spend our time wisely on where that risk may be.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. Someone wanted to get into auditing. How do you do that? Is there like certifications you have to have, or is it like a specific degree if you want to get into auditing?
Yeah, so all auditing really best background is accounting or finance majors. So definitely like a business focused major.
Mm-hmm.
Just because there is a lot of core like accounting, financial understanding that comes with any industry, not just banking, but any industry.
Okay.
Auditing really does center around accounting a lot of the times, and how the funds and the flow of things are managed at a company.
Sure.
Regardless if you're banking or manufacturing. So definitely like a background with a business degree. Beyond that, there are many certifications you can get as an auditor. So, I'm a CPA, I'm a certified public accountant, even though I'm not in a firm or I'm not doing someone's taxes, right? People hear I'm a
Sure.
CPA and they're like, oh, so you do people's taxes? No, I could, but I don't.
Not your
I hate doing taxes. No.
I don't, but So
You
that
do your own taxes is the question.
I do.
There you go.
I do my own taxes. I do. But aside from that, there is like a certified internal auditor. There's certified fraud examiner, right? So like a lot of what auditors do can reveal if there's, fraudulent activity, right? There's like forensic accountants and things like that
Yeah.
will specifically zero in on, looking for criminal activity. If a company thinks someone's, if money goes missing, you can call in a forensic accountant to help you.
That sounds like a fun job title.
Yeah.
So I put that on my business card.
What do you do? I don't know. It's just cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are definitely a lot of different certification routes you can take to zero in on, but
Are there different types of auditors in? Like, is there IT auditing versus operational auditors versus
Yes.
other? Okay.
yes, absolutely. You can definitely get into different niches there, right? Like you can be definitely IT. Today's cybersecurity risks to all companies. IT is definitely a huge one. So, you can start out with, kind of an IT background. And if you know how to properly, mitigate cybersecurity risks, then you could audit and check others that are mitigating and protecting cybersecurity risks. So, if you wanted to be more compliance specific, right?
Yeah.
You can really focus in on compliance rules as a background and then become an auditor of those topics, right? So there's definitely from an operational perspective, that's kind of more broad, right? So that would be more industry specific. So like we're in banking, so like an understanding of banking operations to be able to audit the operations here. But with any industry, they all have their own sets of rules and regulations and normal operating practices. If you get like the general background in IT or in accounting or in finance, you're going to have a lot of opportunities, across any industry, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, we tend to think of audit as being finance specific because it sounds like a financial,
Right.
it sounds like a financial thing. But to some degree, there's auditing in, like you said, even in manufacturing. I mean, so, whoever inspector number 35 was, that it was in my suit coat pocket when I pulled out the little tag when I bought it, is in a weird way sort of an auditor. They're randomly pulling things off the assembly line and making sure that things are being put together right, that the stitching's good, that the right color fabric is being used. They're not sewing red arms onto blue coats and things like that. So it's not as in depth and probably, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right word as
Financial.
yeah, I mean, as a financial auditor, but it's essentially the basic thing. Like everything needs to have a check. You can't just let people go off and do whatever they want to do all the time, because eventually somebody's going to get into the mix that tries to make it about them and not about what's good for the customer, right? And so if it's the person on the assembly line, that's using an inferior material, the code's going to fall apart. If it's your bank, you want to make sure that people are making decisions that are, because there are arguably decisions that banks or organizations that serve customers could make that are in the best interest of the company, but not necessarily for the customer. So you want to make sure that the customer is being handled first.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and that's where, a lot of, consumer compliance rules are to protect customers and to make sure that, their interest is put first. But obviously, any company has to make good decisions to stay in business and to be able to continue to serve those customers. So it's definitely a balance
Yeah.
approach.
Cool. What else you got, Jeff? Anything?
Oh, you want to talk about where you can find more information? You want to talk about the IIA at all?
Sure. Yeah. So the Institute of Internal Auditors obviously are the ones that facilitate Audit Awareness Month. So, if you Google Institute of Internal Auditors, their site comes up. It tells you all about, the benefit of internal auditors and what they strive to do to help the world, right?
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, it's global, it's national, right? Internal auditors are kind of here to help, and there's a lot of information out there on how they can add value, help protect customers, help protect the company, and add value, right? Like having that objective input to help connect processes, connect people is ultimately the goal. So
I think we've had a couple of conversations in here, just about there are so many different occupations you can get into when it comes to banking that, when people oftentimes think of banking, they either think of a CEO, right? Or they think of a teller, maybe a branch manager or something, but they think of the people they see every day.
Sure.
But there are a lot of different occupations that go into the banking world, from marketing to audit to IT. So many different disciplines that you can get into that can involve banking beyond just what you see when you walk into your local branch, right?
And that's why you need audit, because there's so many different departments that need to work together, and audit helps make them work together.
Same thing, marketing, right? Marketing, every company needs marketing, right? Everyone needs a good, forward facing to the public of whoever your audience is. So marketing's one of those that transcends all industries. IT, human resources, all companies need those types of input.
Yeah, and we work with audit a lot and compliance a lot, because in the world of advertising, there are a lot of rules to follow in terms of banking, in terms of how we can present products and how we talk to customers, and whether certain products are FDIC insured or not, things like that. So, we definitely work with compliance a lot in the marketing side of banking, and the only other industry I can think of that is probably as or more heavily regulated in terms of how you can present products and services to customers is maybe food. That's probably about it. We are very, very diligent about how we present things, because we want to be above board. We want people to understand what it is that they're actually getting, right? And audit helps to make sure that stays correct as well, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the rules are just about that, like, what you say is what you do.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, audit will review our website and we'll say, hey, we have these products out there with these types of fees and rates noted, and here's some details on how these products work. And we'll look at that. We'll maybe talk to the business lines that own those products and make sure that, marketing and the people that own the product and our viewpoint of how that really processes in the back in the system, all that really is aligned and working the way we say, so that, we do have the accurate information out there for our customers to make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you know any internal auditors in the month of May, give them a thumbs up. Tell them that you're not afraid of them. That,
Yeah.
But I mean, really, I think it's, you said it at the beginning, like, if you like puzzles, if you like, you don't have to, you kind of have to like numbers a little bit, to do this kind of auditing, but.
You do. Yeah. You have to really like reading and writing too, which people don't expect. Right.
Yeah.
So, I have an accounting degree, and I think people expect I'm with like my calculator and my pocket protector and my Excel spreadsheets all day. But
Yeah, but you're an interpreter. I mean, more than a mathematician, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Yeah. I mean, a lot of just like reading even accounting rules, reading banking rules, reading whatever the industry rules are, and understanding, like reading comprehension, understanding those, and then making sure we have good written documentation that matches those is a lot of the job.
I mean, it strikes me as almost like you're almost like halfway to being a lawyer in a lot of ways. Like, you have to be able to interpret a lot of that stuff and be willing to read a lot of fine print. Well, thank you very much for coming down and talking with us. I mean, really, it's very enlightening. And I think a lot of people that, again, we've talked in the past about different occupations and things in banking, and there's a lot of cool stuff out there that you can do beyond what you might imagine.
I've learned a lot this past month about auditing.
Yeah. So until next May. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
We'll have a refresh
next month so we can come.
Yay.
Right.
All right.
So excited. We're here to help. Right?
That's right.
We're here to help you. So.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts, with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to bank chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The host, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The host of Bank Chats is not an attorney, accountant, or financial advisor, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation. When people think of careers in the banking industry, auditor isn't typically among the first jobs that spring to mind. But while the occupations like bank manager or teller might be more common, auditors play a critical role in keeping things running smoothly and safely. That is important not only for the bank as an organization, but also for the customers who entrust their finances to the bank for safekeeping. Our thanks to Laura Fiore for joining us on the program today, and as always to my co-host and the executive producer of the show, Jeff McTavish. Ameriserve Presents Bank Chats is produced and distributed by Ameriserve Financial Incorporated. Music by Rattlesnake, Milo, and Andrea Kalitkin. You can find the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms, or you can now view the podcast on YouTube. Please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For now, I'm Drew Thomas. So long.